11 o'clock, and we have now hundreds of people on this as part of this virtual experience. I want to go ahead and get started because while I know other people will be joining this, many people have been anticipating and eagerly waiting. We've had people queued up to join this presentation for some time this morning. And so if you are one of the hundreds of people who have joined this virtual presentation, thank you for joining. When I looked at the list of some of the people who had signed up to listen and to perhaps virtually ask questions or make comments, I thought about what a terrific amount of talent we have in West Virginia, how blessed we are to live in a beautiful state that has native daughters and sons who love it very, very much, whom, as they said about Senator Byrd, if you opened up his heart, you would see that West Virginia was writ large upon it. So thank you for all of those who have joined in today. The West Virginia Chamber of Commerce could not be more proud or happier than to bring native son Brad Smith for this virtual presentation. Brad is going to be introduced this morning by Jack Hooveris. Jack is a longtime friend and colleague. He is the president of HQ Publishing Company in Huntington. He is a journalism graduate from Marshall University. His magazines include Huntington Quarterly Magazine, Marshall Magazine, the West Virginia Lawyer. And coming out next month, I'm very proud to say, West Virginia Chamber Magazine, which, as a little preview, will feature Brad Smith on its cover. With that, I will go ahead and say about Jack that he is a graduate of the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce program, Leadership West Virginia, and he has been named West Virginia's Entrepreneur of the Year by the U.S. Small Business Administration. Jack, I'm going to turn the program over to you with my gratitude, deep appreciation, and thanks to you, Jack, for helping put this presentation together, and to you, Brad Smith. And while Jack is going to do the introduction for Brad, I do want to say that it has been said about Brad that people who demand excellence don't get it nearly as often as people who inspire it. And we are about to be inspired. Thank you, Jack. I'm turning the program over to you. I can't wait. I would like to say a lot more, but I want to hear from Brad Smith. Thank you, Jack.
I agree. Thanks, Steve. Good morning, Chamber members, and thank you for joining us for this virtual presentation. I'm honored to be here today with someone I greatly respect and admire, Mr. Brad Smith. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to interview and write several articles about Brad for various publications. So just in case you aren't familiar with Brad, let me tell you a little bit about him. He was born and raised in Kenova and earned his degree in marketing from Marshall University in 1986. He went on to earn his master's degree in management and leadership development from Aquinas College in 1991. There he is bringing Jennifer, who was that again? Jennifer Garner to Huntington, I'm sorry. Brad rose to prominence a little over 12 years ago when, at the age of just 43, he was named CEO of Intuit, which is a software giant in Silicon Valley. With offices right next door to Google, Intuit is best known for such products as QuickBooks, TurboTax, Mint, and employs more than 10,000 people worldwide. Brad's 11-year tenure at the helm saw impressive growth at the company. When he took over as CEO in 2008, the stock price was $30 a share. When he stepped down in 2018, the stock was $215 a share. That's an increase of 626% in just 11 years. At Intuit, Brad was a bit of a rock star with the employees, and his leadership style earned him numerous accolades. In 2017, Fortune magazine ranked him number 6 on its list of the top CEOs in the United States, while Forbes magazine named him one of the top 10 influential American business leaders. When he announced his retirement at the end of 2018, the company honored him by naming the company's flagship building on the Intuit campus in his honor. One of the main reasons Brad chose to step down as CEO was to spend more time with his wife, Elise, and their two daughters, Peyton and Devin. However, he continues to serve as executive chairman of Intuit's board of directors, and he sits on the board of directors at Nordstrom and SurveyMonkey. Another motivating factor for his decision to step down as CEO was born out of his desire to pay it forward. In partnership with his wife, Elise, he founded the Wing to Wing Foundation. The foundation strives to advance education and entrepreneurship in underserved communities. In recent years, he and Elise have donated $35 million to Marshall University, one of the largest gifts in the university's history. The couple continues to work to ensure that people of Appalachia are no longer overlooked and are given every possible chance to succeed. Their foundation has sponsored efforts to support early childhood development, funded public school laptops, tablets, and school supplies, set up scholarships for students from West Virginia and Ohio who are the first generation in their families to attend college, and partner closely with the state's major universities to bring entrepreneurial techniques and resources to advance the state's ability to participate in the 21st century. There are two things you will notice about Brad if you ever meet him in person. He still wears his Marshall University class ring, and he still has his West Virginia accent. At the start of his career at another major corporation, one of his bosses advised Brad to enroll in a speech class to eliminate his Appalachian drawl, but the classes didn't work. As Brad told me years ago when we first met, you know, it's funny, I think that experience helped me learn an invaluable life lesson, to be authentic to who you are. It is now my distinct honor to introduce you to one of the most accomplished individuals that West Virginia has ever produced. He is humble, genuine, and as generous as they come. Welcome, Brad.
Jack, thank you so much. And Steve, thank you for your kind words. And I want to thank the Chamber for allowing me to participate. And many of you have heard me before say this, but I mean it sincerely from the bottom of my heart. An introduction that was as simple and elegant as Brad from Kenova, West Virginia would have said it all, because I think that sets the bar high, and that's an aspiration I try to live up to every day. So thank you so much for having me today. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Before I ask my first question, I want to let the audience know that if you have any questions of your own for Brad, please send them to me in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And if time permits, we will be sure to get to them. All right, Brad, here we go. First question. Now that you have retired from Intuit, one would think that you would be slowing down, playing lots of golf, and taking it easy. But from what I know of you, that hasn't quite been the case. Can you tell us what you've been up to recently and how a quote from Mark Twain has motivated you?
I sure can. So Jack, you know, my wife Elise and I, we laugh about this. She says staying busy would be an understatement, but honestly, that was our plan all along. When I stepped down as the CEO of Intuit, I never planned to retire. I planned to seek out what the next grand challenge would be that she and I could do together. And that's where the Mark Twain quote comes in. Mark Twain once said, the two most important days in your life are the day that you're born and the day that you discover why. And I wanted to make sure that I truly understood my purpose, my why in this next chapter. And the way I went about that, I wrote in an article in LinkedIn you can find, it was written in October, but I went out and interviewed people that are incredibly successful and still actively contributing in their 70s and 80s. And I sought to understand from them what were the life choices they made in their 40s and 50s that set them up to still be so productive and all these years later. And as I reflected on their advice, it became clear to me what my why is. And that is to be a champion for the overlooked and the underserved, to be a warrior for human dignity, to unleash human potential in communities and in individuals that perhaps have lost some hope. And I'm getting the chance to do that now in three ways. The first is serving as the executive chairman of Intuit, where in addition to my board responsibilities, I serve as the sponsor of our corporate social responsibility efforts. And that's where we focus on job readiness, job creation, and the environment to prepare communities that have actually been overlooked to participate in the 21st century. And that's where things like Bluefield, West Virginia come in. The second thing I'm doing is I'm serving on two additional boards that you just mentioned, Nordstrom and SurveyMonkey, but I also coach 15 CEOs of other companies. And through their platforms and through their companies, we're also leaning into the exact same thing. And then last but not least, is Elise and I are proud of the work that our foundation, the Wing to Wing Foundation, is doing, supporting all the many initiatives that you just described in your introduction. So if I had to sum it all up, Tim McGraw said it best in the final stanza of Humble and Kind. When you get to where you're going, don't forget to stop and turn back around and help the next one in line. And try to always stay humble and kind. And that's hopefully the aspiration we have in this next chapter. And it's going to keep us busy, but I like it that way.
We've talked a lot over the years about what West Virginia needs to move its economy forward. We can go into more details later, but for now, what do you see as our state's single greatest challenge?
Jack, you know, when we look at the world from our individual lens, we see lots of things that we wish we could tackle, do better, improve upon. But if I step back and look at it holistically and I put it in the context of what's happening around the world, the answer for me is crystal clear. We need ubiquitous, high-speed internet connectivity to every home and every hauler in the state with no one left behind. If our state plans to participate, contribute, and compete in the 21st century, COVID just exposed the realities if we don't have that kind of an asset. It sets back education because our kids can't distance learn. They can't prepare themselves to participate in a world that's much more digital. It sets back jobs and economies. Companies will not relocate here. Their employees can't remote work here. We can't create the next generation of entrepreneurs with the next set of skills to participate. And it sets back our own health and welfare because we can't do telemedicine. We can't have good standards of living where so many things are now delivered through the cloud. And so it's a combination of those things that I think makes that by far the single most important initiative that we have to take on as a West Virginia community, or I fear that we will be relegated to a distant 49th, 50th in so many polls for the next several decades.
I know we've talked about you advocating for broadband expansion over the last 2 years at least. In your opinion, how much progress has been made in that time to extend broadband to every corner of the state?
I have to say I'm humbled by the leadership in this state. I love what our federal elected officials are doing, our U.S. senators, our congressmen and women. I love the work that's going on with the governor and the state legislature and individual citizens. And there's a lot that's been happening. There was work to try to take some of the assets from Frontier Communications as they declared bankruptcy and say, can we take those assets and find new ways to repurpose them? Unfortunately, at this moment in time, that particular effort may be stalled, but the passion behind it has not. I love the work that's going on with Zal and with Facebook to try to get middle mile fiber laid across the state. You then have the individual ISPs, whether it is CityNet and Prodigy doing work. You have regional efforts like Upshur County and Thundercloud and Wayne County. And there was just a lot of people leaning in. And I think that's what we need is we need everybody to first understand that while we have a lot of priorities, most of them will be dependent upon high-speed internet connectivity. And then we're going to have to find a way to coalesce and get all those efforts lined up.
You've talked about how expensive it is to extend broadband. Can you give our audience an idea of the costs involved?
Well, I'm not an expert, but I've spent a lot of time, as you mentioned, over the last few years, not only studying other rural communities that have done this successfully, but speaking to the thought leaders and those people on the ground here who are actually doing the work. And when I talk to them, the rough numbers are about $30,000 a mile to lay the fiber, and then $1,500 to connect every household. And most for-profit companies say that's just economically not viable. But you know what? That may not be economically unviable, but it's socially irresponsible. If we do not connect every home, that's like utilities, that's like electricity and water. So we're going to have to find a way through public, private, and nonprofit efforts to come together and say, let's do the right thing and give everyone a chance to participate.
You recently told me that prior to the coronavirus epidemic, around 20% of the employees at Fortune 500 companies work remotely. What are experts predicting will happen going forward in terms of employees working remotely?
It's a great question, Jack. And we all know, for those of us who've been around for a while, certainly me, I've been around since hieroglyphics were written on the walls, that anytime you have a market disruption, Y2K, 9/11, the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, or now you have the pandemic, it accelerates trends that were already in the market by 3 to 5 years. And there is no question we were already living in a digital first world, with computers in the palm of our hand, on our wristwatches at the command of our voice with Alexa and Siri, and powered by artificial intelligence and machine learning. And that's allowed employees in companies to begin to do work remotely as long as they have high-speed internet connectivity. And going into the pandemic, the national numbers were 23% of all workers that work for Amazon, Intuit, Salesforce, Procter & Gamble, you name the companies, were already empowered to work anywhere they want in the United States. Now, through the pandemic, companies have discovered two things. They're a lot more productive working from home than many companies ever imagined, and it saves a lot of money in real estate and office space. So every company right now that I am talking to is revisiting their work from home policies and their office footprint. And now the numbers, according to the business council that I participate in, and that's the CEOs of the top 150 companies, the numbers are 40 to 50% will be able to work from anywhere they want coming out of the pandemic. And some companies have already declared 100%. Twitter, Square, Facebook saying potentially that as well. So it's going to be a huge opportunity to have people working from anywhere they want in this next chapter.
Okay, the next question comes from our friend Steve Roberts. What do you mean when you say people need to be ready for jobs of the 21st century?
Yeah, it's a great question. I just mentioned that going into this pandemic, if you step back, the world was already moving to digital. Not all of us experienced it that way because we had other ways of doing things in life. But as soon as we were told to shelter in place, a lot of people, regardless of their age, found out they could buy online and do curbside pickup or home delivery. They found out they could interact with friends, they could interact with peers, they could interact with their work through Zoom. They learned about distance learning, they learned about telemedicine, and while none of us want to have it 100% like it has been, and we'll all want to get back to some semblance of what we considered normal, the genie's out of the bottle. It is now going to become a bigger mix of our lifestyle going forward. So we have to have the skills, the jobs, and the technology to participate in that next chapter. So that means for students, I've been speaking a lot to all the university and K through 12 educators, and we talk about the 4 Ds, the 4 skills that all students will need to graduate with if they're going to participate in this next chapter. The first D is design thinking, or what's known as discovery-driven planning, and that basically means teaching our young men and women how to develop scenarios of the future instead of trying to predict the future. My grandfather used to say, he who lives with a crystal ball ends up eating a lot of ground glass. And COVID proved that. No one had a playbook to navigate through this. We had to try different stuff. So we need to teach young men and women how to think that way. The second D, after you go from design thinking, is developer acumen. Every young child needs to learn how to express an idea in code, even if they're not going to be a developer or an engineer. Our generation, Jack, learned how to write in cursive, even though not all of us became great journalists like you. But we needed to learn to write our ideas in the way that was the most efficient at the time. The third is we need to continue to embrace the arts. It's known as design as a craft. Technology is incredibly complicated. It's intimidating. That's why Amazon does so well, because it's one-click checkout, and Apple outsells Android because it's so easy for everyone to use. You need art. And then the last is data. We need to teach young men and women how to look for patterns and find truth in the data. We all manage our health now with a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, or we have a blood pressure device, but something that gives us data that tells us how we're doing. The same thing goes for businesses, same thing goes for sporting clubs. So those are the 4 Ds: discovery-driven thinking, developer acumen, design and arts as a craft, and data. And if you think about that, that means we have to begin to rethink education, and we need to begin to reskill as adults. And this is where people get nervous. And I would tell you there's no reason to be nervous. In 1850, almost 2/3 of the United States were farmers. 1900, it was 40%. Now it's less than 1%. But going into the pandemic, we all found other ways to employ ourselves. So we just have to reimagine what we can do to add value in the next chapter. And we can and we will do that.
Have 4-year degrees lost relevance?
No. No, if you look at the data, and the data is fresh coming out right now, if you look at someone in their 20s with a 4-year degree and compare it to someone with a high school equivalency degree, they'll make on average a median of $44,000 a year versus $30,000. Someone with a 4-year degree is 3.5 times less likely to fall into poverty than someone with a high school degree or less. And over their lifetime, someone with a 4-year degree will earn about $1 million more than someone with a high school degree. But it may not have lost relevance, but I think as a society, we've lost respect for all kinds of vocations and education, and they all matter. And Germany has shown us that. Almost half of the German workforce graduated with a VOTEC degree, not a 4-year degree, and they're one of the most productive countries in the world per capita. And we have to get back to embracing VOTEC, coding boot camps, micro certifications, and giving everyone a chance to participate. We're a nation of doers. By the way, Amazon said the #1 job they're struggling to fill right now are truck drivers. We need electricians, we need plumbers, we need everybody. A 4-year degree has not lost its relevance, but we need to regain the respect we have and the dignity that we provide those who choose not to go to college.
Another question from our friend Steve Roberts. Thinking about all the states in the U.S., where are some of the places where school systems are doing a good job in preparing students for the 21st century workforce?
This is a great question. And Steve, I thank you for submitting it. I don't think there's a particular state that's doing it well across the board, but there are pockets of excellence in every state, including our own. And if you read the book, What Schools Could Be, or What School Could Be by Ted Dintersmith, and it's accompanied by this wonderful video on Netflix called Most Likely to Succeed. So What School Could Be by Ted Dintersmith and the video Most Likely to Succeed. He spent years studying where excellence is happening in K through 12 and universities, and then trying to share the best practices they all have in common. And I think if we begin to study those, it used to be called plagiarism, now it's called benchmarking. If we go take those practices that have been proven elsewhere and begin to apply them in our own schools, then we can all collectively improve every student's opportunity to participate.
And my dad told me when I first started in business, you don't need to reinvent the wheel sometimes. Find somebody else who's doing it well and copy it.
Yes.
I mean, not plagiarize, but, learn from their success. How can higher education work with industry to be in sync with employers' needs?
I think there are 2 ways that higher education can do this. And again, I believe our institutions in the state are doing a wonderful job of leaning in this area. The first is to understand from the local employers as well as the national and global employers, what are the skills and the experiences most in demand, and then tailor your curriculum to prepare your students to have those skills. And then the second thing is to bring the problems of the community into the classroom and give students real business problems to solve. Help the local Dunkin' Donuts operator figure out how to generate more traffic for his or her store. And what happens there is we're no longer making up these Acme widget case studies. We're doing real case studies on businesses in the community. The students learn while the businesses improve. So I think it's a symbiotic relationship. Let's prepare our students for the skills our employers need, and let's bring our employers' problems into our classrooms so our students can practice and the employer can benefit.
In February, you brought the CEOs of PayPal and Adobe to Huntington, where 1,800 people packed the Keith Albee Theater to hear their insights. Why did you feel that was important?
Well, first of all, everyone in the Silicon Valley has heard so much about West Virginia that they were interested in finally coming. I have told this story everywhere I lived, and on my LinkedIn profile, it says, just a boy from a small hometown who spent 22 years looking for a way out and every day since looking for a way home. So these are friends of mine, and there are many more that are going to be coming. But the short answer to your question is, I wanted the West Virginia residents to hear from some of the greatest thought leaders in the world in terms of business. And by hearing them, they would find out these individuals came from similar backgrounds as us. They put their pants on the same way. They have the same insecurities. They're afraid they don't have all the right answers, and they're making it up as they go. And so I wanted our team here in West Virginia to say, wow, I can do that. And then on the other side, I wanted those CEOs to see the tremendous talent here in West Virginia. I've told everyone in the Silicon Valley, when they think of West Virginia, they think of our yesterday. And I say there is no question our history was in the mountains, our future is in the clouds, but the one thing that is unchanged is our people. And it's our people who turn all of that into magic, whether it was coal or whether it's going to be the digital generation of the future. We know how to take a problem and solve it elegantly. And I wanted those CEOs to see the talent sitting in that room, and they did, and they were impressed.
You've got a business incubator here in downtown Huntington named after you. What are the goals of that?
You know, having something named after you is it's a tremendous honor, and quite frankly, it's kind of embarrassing and humbling. But I would tell you this: it's designed to tackle the 75% reality. And let me tell you what the 75% reality is. Today, 75% of students graduating high school and college have a dream of owning their own business and starting their own company. They don't want to go work for another company. And that is completely opposite of what it was in 1986, Jack, when you and I and Bill Noe and others were coming out, and we all wanted to go to work for Microsoft and General Electric. So in that period of time, it's completely flip-flopped. So 75% reality is this generation wants to be entrepreneurs. The second 75% is that 75% of all new jobs are created by startups. They're not created by Amazon, Microsoft, and others. And this is a global number, not just the US. And then the third is 75% of all venture capital last year went to 3 states, California, New York, and Massachusetts. Even though God was egalitarian in handing out talent, and our young men and women want to be entrepreneurs just like every place else, the opportunities weren't here. So we are leaning in, and there's a big we, a collective we. Lots of people, universities, K through 12 educators, John Chambers, Ray Lane, myself, and the list goes on, to say we have studied Israel, we have studied India, we've studied France, we've studied Ireland, we've studied Pittsburgh, we've studied Detroit. All these places have reinvented themselves, and we have the chance to become the startup state, where we can actually build our own companies and create our own future and not hope that somebody will come in and relocate in our state, which we're always going to be towards the bottom because we just don't have a lot of land to build on, but we can build the next Amazon. So that's what the incubator is designed to do, is to foster that entrepreneurial spirit, to tap into the students and the local community entrepreneurs, and to build the next chapter of great for our state.
I'm not exactly sure, but I think you've started some prosperity hubs in other parts of Appalachia. Can you tell us a little bit about those and how they're similar maybe to the incubator?
I can. In fact, it kind of goes back to the 75% reality. But one of the facts that a lot of people don't understand is 1 in 6 Americans live in what is called a distressed community, where its industrial base or its extraction history has become less relevant today and will become increasingly less relevant going forward. And so they look like ghost towns. And yet when you go in and you talk to these people in these communities and you see these historic buildings, you know that while that chapter may be closed, there's a beautiful new chapter awaiting them just around the corner. And so in 2016, it was a personal passion of mine working with Intuit to say, let's go into these communities, bring jobs that may be elsewhere around the world back onto our shores and put them in these local communities. And we're in Wise, Virginia, Johnstown, Pennsylvania, Bluefield, West Virginia, Morristown, Tennessee, Hazard, Kentucky, Lawton, Oklahoma, and we're going to open a 7th up. We have one up in Canada as well. But what it's designed to do, Jack, is 2 things. To go in and prepare the young men and women with the skills needed for the 21st century. So far, since 2016, we have worked with 150,000 students to bring the Silicon Valley techniques into their community colleges, their K through 12 schools, and the universities to teach them these skills. The second is we bring jobs. We create these facilities called prosperity hubs. And the prosperity hubs are a range of jobs that allow you to progress in your career and even pay for your tuition to get continuing education. So far, we've created 2,200 jobs in these small communities. And for every dollar we've invested, we've created $1.59 in economic impact. In Bluefield alone, we have 150 people working there now. We'll have 250 by December. And we're on our way up to over 500. And the same thing is happening in Hazard and all those other places. And it's so exciting to see these people. And by the way, I will throw this out. This is one important point. We have over 30 centers around the world. Bluefield, Wise, and Johnstown are 1, 2, and 3 in terms of the highest customer satisfaction, the lowest cost to serve, and the best employee engagement. They outperform every other facility that we have around the world. So we get great business outcomes and the community gets a great benefit as well.
Wow. With so many people working from home during this pandemic, what advice can you give company owners or business managers on how to keep their employees motivated and productive?
Yes, we've all been trying to figure this out as we go, haven't we?
Yep.
So I'll start first with a macro tip, and then I'll share 3 things that I have come to appreciate as well as learn from others. The macro tip is, in times of crisis, increase your communication 3x. Start talking to employees when you have questions and not answers, and engage them to help you think through the problem together. And I think most business leaders are doing that now because none of us had an instruction booklet for COVID. But once you've kind of increased your communication back and forth, there are 3 things that I see people doing that are helping them come through this a lot better than others. It is empathize, edit, and adapt. Empathize with your employees and their families as they struggle to have their kids do distance learning, while they try to have paychecks still coming in, while they try to separate work from home, and give them a little bit of slack. The second is edit. You can't do lots of things when you're in a distance learning or a remote kind of work from home situation. So you've got to get down to the top 2 or 3 things that deliver 80% of the outcome and simplify everything else. Just take things off people's plate. And then the third is to adapt. Don't think about reopening or returning to work. Think about reimagining and reinventing how you will reopen, and embrace some of the things that you discovered during the pandemic were working better than you could have ever imagined, while also returning to some of the other things you were doing before you got shut down. Come out a newer and better version of yourself.
There was one more thing that you advised me to do that my girlfriend Tracy thought was wonderful, which was the first thing you do when you talk to them remotely is ask about them.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of people don't want to let their bosses know the stress they're under because they think that makes them look weak. But we all know vulnerability is a strength, and very few people are strong enough to be soft. And that includes bosses. And the most important thing we can do is to start by asking, how are you doing? And they'll give you an answer, oh, we're doing fine, or we're adjusting, and say, no, really, how are you doing? And let them tell you it's a struggle that they can't get their kids Zoom video to connect with the school, or the internet is down, or that they're really trying to figure out how they're going to pay rent next month. And listen empathetically, and if you can, try to help. But that's the most important thing. So we say people first, projects second.
What advice do you have for West Virginia business owners on how to be more productive and profitable in the coming decade?
I kind of alluded to it in that last answer. One of the things that I learned in 2008, 2009, when we were navigating through the great financial crisis, is I had a board member who said, Brad, I want you to ask all the employees in your company right now to take a piece of paper, and for however many months we're going to be working our way through this knothole, have them write down everything that is actually working better than they would have expected. And then when you come out of this downturn, take all those papers and collect them, and then say, we're now going to make that the new way of doing business. So a lot of companies, restaurants and others, figured out that having an ability to buy online and having curbside pickup or come in and take out may not have been the way they did business, but it actually is a way of doing business. And so I think it's important for every business owner right now to take an inventory of what's working better than you expected, and then what magic you haven't been able to employ because you haven't been able to open the doors, and bring that back and just be a different version of your company. And that will set you up for greatness in the next chapter.
All right. Last question before we open it up to some questions from the audience. What can West Virginia elected officials do to improve the economy of the state in the coming decade? I think I know one of the answers will be broadband, broadband, broadband.
And I might ladder up to just the concept and then put broadband into that context. I think this is our chance to become the startup state. I alluded to Israel, and there's a book written called The Startup Nation. Israel is one of the smallest countries in the world, and yet they have produced more startups and entrepreneurs per capita than almost any other country in the world. And we have studied those best practices, and we have the same opportunity to do it here in the state. But to do that, to become the startup state, instead of hoping to get the next big employer to move in with a bunch of tax breaks, what we have to do is put those dollars and resources into broadband connectivity, into preparing our students with the entrepreneurial skills and the digital skills for the future, from K through 12 through our community colleges and universities, and then any sort of startup friendly policies. And we don't have to make them up. We simply have to study the places that have a lot of entrepreneurial activity happening and then say, let's put that in our state as well. If we can all say, if we all agree that this is our chance to be the startup state, and by the way, West Virginians love to do. You know, we have bosses, but we actually like to do things ourselves. And that's the power of being an entrepreneur, is you can build your own dream. I think that's going to connect our magic in ways that can really write the next chapter for the state.
Great. Now we're going to try to open this up to some questions that were texted into me. And this is only my third time using Zoom. So I'm doing this on my phone. So here we go. Here's an interesting one. Could the internet satellites that Elon Musk plans to launch solve the broadband problem in West Virginia?
I wish it was as elegant as a silver bullet like the satellites. I think all of us that are working with satellite connectivity now, or Wi-Fi connectivity, our mountains are our blessing and our mountains are also our challenge. It takes a lot to try to make sure that we've got belts and suspenders so that no one's ever getting interrupted service. I think it's going to be a combination of satellites, a combination of Wi-Fi, a combination of fiber in the ground. We need to get whatever works for whatever part of the state and make sure that it's got a backup plan if that particular system goes down. So I think it's a part of it. I think Project Loom from Google. I think the work Facebook's doing to lay the fiber in the ground. I think the work that CityNet, Prodigy, and others are doing. It's going to take all of those. But I will say, Jack, the one thing I think we need is we need to play the orchestra. Right now we have saxophone players and clarinets and trumpets and drummers, trombones, and they're all going at it in a different way. We now need somebody to step up and say, we're all going to play off the same sheet music. Everyone's effort needs to ladder up to one plan, not 40 plans, but one plan. And I was really encouraged by the governor's executive order and the opportunity to potentially get access to those $700+ million of federal funds. But to get that, we have to have one plan, not 40. And everyone at the table saying, here's how I'm going to contribute to that.
One master plan.
We're going to play the orchestra.
How can the West Virginia Chamber best utilize its limited resources to foster greater economic activity for West Virginia?
I love this. I love this. You know, when you go back and you ask yourself the question, how many resources did it take to start Google? The answer was 2, Larry and Sergey, and they used a computer on loan from Stanford. And how many resources did it take to start Facebook? And it was Mark Zuckerberg and his partner at the time, and they were using a technology that they tapped into Facebook. And so behind that is a simple thing. Innovation loves constraint. The scrappier you are, the more innovative you'll become. And it doesn't take a lot of resources. It takes clarity of purpose and then a coalition of the willing. And I often say to President Gee and President Gilbert and others that it's not, Rudyard Kipling said, it's not the big that eat the small, it's the fast that eat the slow. And our state may not be big, and maybe the chamber doesn't have a lot of resources, but that's what makes us great. Because we can rub 2 nickels together and turn them into a $10 bill. We just have to do the work to make it happen.
I'm scanning some more of these questions here. This is a funny one from an ex-Intuit employee. I'm wondering what would be the best way to reach out to Brad for mentorship. Maybe we should direct her to your website.
Yeah, Brad_Smith at Intuit.com. The address hasn't changed. And if you remember from the days of working with me, I'm always happy to take that email and figure out how best to help.
I can't believe you do that.
Of course. You know what? This is paying it forward. I would have never had the chance to participate in the things I've had the chance to do if people didn't do it for me. And I surrounded myself with people smarter than me. So believe me, when I meet with someone like this employee or ex-employee, I will learn more from him or her than I'll ever give back.
You once told me about how you kind of space out your day with regards to answering emails. That might be something people are interested in knowing who get a lot of emails.
Yeah.
Which you must get a lot of emails.
Yeah, I do. I get 300-400 a day, and I go to bed at night with a completely empty inbox. I wake up in the morning completely full again, and then I work through it. And then like most of us, I have a full day. I'll have 10 or 12 meetings throughout the day. and a lot of unplanned things that pop up. So I've learned some life hacks. The first thing I do is I go back to the old days before the internet, when we used to have inboxes and outboxes, and we got trained to touch something once. Touch it, read it, commit it to memory, or touch it, see it's not relevant, throw it away, or touch it and see it's somebody else's job and forward it to them. So the first thing you have to do is read and respond in the moment. Don't save it for later. And then the second is, I don't schedule 1 hour meetings. I schedule 45-minute meetings. And after a 45-minute meeting, I quickly go to email and I try to keep up on the 30 or 40 that came through with a very quick read and act. And then by the time that next meeting starts, I've usually got it down almost to zero. And if you do that throughout the day and you leave yourself 20 to 30 minutes at the end of the day, you can keep your email manageable.
I think you've kind of answered this one, but as a young person, how do we keep talented, intelligent young adults in West Virginia?
You have to inspire in them two things. One is that there is hope, there's potential, there's opportunity, and there is need for them to stay in West Virginia, or in some cases to come to West Virginia. Show them that there is a fertile field here for them to actually plant their seeds and create magic. And the second is, I say this to my daughters who are in their 20s. You know, the grass may be greener on the other side, but that's because there's a lot of manure over there. You're going to find out that every single place has its own challenges. But when you step away from West Virginia, like so many of us have, and then you look back, I will tell you, you will discover that this state, these people, and the opportunities around us are better than 95% of anybody else's opportunities. I always say that John Denver had it right when he said almost heaven, and this is where God put his kindest angels. And who would not want to be here?
Yeah, I mean, the whole economy is changing, so you don't necessarily have to go to San Francisco or New York, Charlotte to find employment these days. And as you said, in the coming decade, Fortune 500 companies who kind of set the standard are going to be using more and more remote employees. So leaving West Virginia is not a requirement like it used to be pre-COVID. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I do agree with that. I think it's remote work is an opportunity that we talked about. Starting your own thing here is an opportunity we talked about. The ability to just step back and say, how can I help this state and how can I help myself reach the next chapter? I mean, that's a great thing to lean into as well.
Steve, Brian, if you guys want to jump in, I'm kind of done asking all my questions.
This is Steve, and I will jump in, except I'm also doing a little coughing over here. So everybody forgive me on that. I have pages of notes. Thank you so much. I hope those who have written in with questions have gotten most or many of their questions answered. And I suppose I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say, hey, can we plan to do this again? We hope we can gather in person, but this has been fantastic. It's interesting to me that Brad started by quoting Mark Twain. A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court is one of my favorite books and one that I frequently quote, although not as well as Brad does. And I can see that this conversation could be continued many times. I have heard from several major figures in West Virginia through the course of the 50 minutes or so that we've been live, saying that they are watching and listening and enjoying and learning and taking notes. So lots of people are tuned in, and I do have some questions here, but I note that our West Virginia Speaker of the House, Roger Hanshaw, would like to be heard. So I'm going to ask Brian Dayton to allow Roger to be live here. So Speaker Hanshaw, we welcome you and are looking forward to your comments and question if you have it.
Good morning, Steve. Thank you. Good morning, Brad.
Hi, Roger. It's a pleasure to speak with you again, my friend.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you making time for us this morning. I was in the midst of typing a question, Brad, when Steve recognized me, so I'll stop the typing and just ask. I'm interested in your thoughts on how we best market West Virginia. So one of the things that we know we have to do a better job of is actually telling our own story to other people who are in a position to positively impact our future, because so often the decisions about West Virginia's economic future are being made by people who are not here in West Virginia. What do you believe are the most effective marketing strategies that we can deploy as a state?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, Roger. And I will say, kind of goes back to a lesson that I learned as my daughters were growing up and they were preparing to go to their local school dances. And sometimes they ran downstairs and their hair was still wet and they didn't have their shirt tucked in yet. And I said, wait, where are you going? They said, hey, I want to get to the dance. It's starting. And I said, wait, it's not when you show up to the dance that matters. It's how you actually show up that matters. You want to make sure you're put together and you got your story ready, and then go and have some fun. And I think for us as a state, we have a lot of groundwork that's going on right now that's putting the pieces in place that will resonate for all these companies that are rethinking where their employees can work, or in some cases where they may open an office. And I think there's a little bit of groundwork that still needs to be done, not a lot. I'm talking months, where I think people are putting pieces in place at the different universities and with the state legislature and with the governor and with our senators and congressmen and women. And I think those pieces will be important, because once we do that, then we have a story to tell. And that story is quite simply, look, if you want to live where you can play, if you want to enjoy the natural resources and the beauty of this state, if you want to come to a place that is serious about having digital skills, fostering a community for entrepreneurs to thrive, fostering a community for digital employees can work from anywhere, and we are serious about our K through 12 school systems, and we have a plan, and it is a comprehensive plan, and we are all aligned against it. I think once we put the bow around that and we're really close, then we can shine the spotlight. And it's a combination of a marketing campaign. It's a combination of myself, John Chambers, Ray Lane, and others talking to people and saying, you've got to check this out. The venture capitalists will follow the great ideas, and so the money will come. But we have to make sure we have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, Roger. And, you know, I think right now we're still on the works on some of that stuff. But if we just continue to lean in, we're not talking 3 years from now, and we're not talking passing any major legislation. It's about just finishing up some of the work around what we're going to do around broadband, how we're going to make sure that we're going to have a place for remote workers to come. Let's get a few of these wins that are sort of under the covers out in the limelight and show how West Virginia is being selected to do some pretty incredible things. And then everyone else will want to come and see that success.
Brad, you mentioned to me a couple of weeks ago when we were chatting that today young people have priorities that are different than they were a long time ago. Can you share with the audience what young people are looking for today when they want to live somewhere?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'll even bring it even to a finer point, Jack. One of the things is when you look at what engineers, programmers, coders, technologists love to do, they love the outdoors. And so one of the best places to attract engineers is to advertise in outdoor recreational magazines, because they rock climb, they do mountain biking, they do whitewater rafting, they like to hike through the woods. And by the way, the entire digital generation, they love the environment, they love to be outdoors. And so you've seen a flight before the pandemic, an exodus from Silicon Valley, from New York into places in Utah they call the Silicon Slopes, Boise, Idaho. But when you step back and you say, look at what they have and compare it to West Virginia, no one has the mountains that we do, the whitewater rapids we do, the hiking trails, all the amazing things we have to offer. And so that is just one big piece that says we really are the main attraction for the next chapter. We just have to let everybody know you can come here and your internet will work. Your kids will get a great education. The universities are teaching the skills that will help you learn how to be an entrepreneur. All those things coming together, and we're this close. We just have to put the final bow around it.
I don't know about you, Steve. That's a good way to end, in my humble opinion.
Jack, I'm just almost speechless here. The presentation from Brad has been so energetic, so uplifting. Your moderation of the program that allowed him to speak and got a few questions in along the way is just so invigorating for all of us, I think. And I will say, and I say this only because I think it is such a compliment to you, Jack, and to Brad, that during the course of this presentation, a person of great distinction who had been invited to speak next week has contacted me and said, I don't know if I can go up against that, but I sure will be part of your program next week. So not only have you invigorated us and helped us and given us terrific ideas and energy and an enthusiasm for this week, but you've also helped us put together a program for next week from a person who was tuned in and watching from a different part of our state, who has said, count me in. So maybe that is the best thing I could say as we conclude this program. Thank you to the many hundreds of people who have tuned in. Thank you to Brad Smith. Thank you, Jack Hooveris, for your important role, key role in putting this program together. And my goodness, so many ideas. The chamber members will be receiving a memo from me shortly that at least at what I thought were some of the key takeaways, but I've got so many pages of key takeaways, I'm going to have to work to condense my thoughts. With that, I do believe we told Brad we wouldn't keep him tied up for more than an hour. I noted from his comments that he said he didn't take meetings that were an hour long. He took meetings that were 45 minutes long. And that causes me to say, I better wrap up because undoubtedly he has important things to do. And I could just not be more appreciative and more looking forward. Here's my pitch again. Can we do this again? I just couldn't look more forward to an opportunity to do this again. And with any luck and with good fortune, maybe the time will come in the not too distant future that we can try to do this in person. So with that, thank you, Brad. Thank you, Jack. Thank you to all who have tuned in. Stay well and enjoy the beautiful September that we are experiencing here in gorgeous West Virginia.
Thanks, everybody.
See you, Brad.
Bye, Jack. Bye, Steve. Bye,
Thanks
Chamber.
so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you so much. Thank you.